Probably the most notorious, infamous moment in wrestling history, the Montreal Screwjob. And what else can be said about the Screwjob that has never already been said? I mean, 24 years, you can't say much more else about this that has not been talked about. So what I want to do, I am going to introduce this tweet here from our friend from the #1 wrestling podcast on Pornhub, the Warden Matt Ritter, Smacking It Raw. Our friend Mr. Ritter replied to that person and said, has anyone published a theory that Vince went back in time to screw over Bret because he came from a future where WCW won the war after Bret defected and Time Warner / AOL put wrestling out of business for good? Has anyone ever published that theory? Not until now. I got some. One, we all know Bret Hart was like the guy in the late 90s in WWE. Like, he was a rock star, like an international star in the 90s is incredible. Vince McMahon loved this man. Always was looking for ways to push Bret Hart. That was his champion. And Vince McMahon, he's always looking towards the future. What we do know, Bret Hart's contract was coming to an expiration soon. Bret Hart wants some more money. Vince McMahon is saying like, hey, yo, I love you, fam. I don't think I love you that much. So Bret Hart considers joining WCW. The screw job happens. History is as we know it, right? What we don't know is Vince McMahon did have the money to pay Bret Hart, but he was like, I like this man, but I don't know about his value long term as we go into this new millennium. And he started to seek out other options. So Vince McMahon took that money, the millions of dollars that he could have paid Bret Hart over the next 5 years. He took that money and used that money to have a time machine built so he could go into the future and see firsthand how things play out. Vincent Kennedy McMahon then travels into the future 5 years past the screw job, like 5 years after, like what would happen if I signed Bret Hart, or what would happen if I let this man go? He saw 5 years later, in 2002, WCW won the war and the WWF ceased to exist, all because of Bret Hart. So Vince McMahon was just like, hey, yo, I got to do something about it. So he goes back, keeps the screw job plan in his back pocket. However, upon traveling back to 1997, this man accidentally went back in time way too far because he travels all the way back to 1990 at SummerSlam. This is my theory. Future Vince meets with 1990 Vince, and backstage at this SummerSlam pay-per-view, an 8-year-old Natalie Neidhart accidentally sees these two Vince McMahons talking, because Natalie Neidhart is just everywhere. But she just happened to be here. And Vince is just like, out of fear that somebody is going to tell on him, he decided to change the finish at SummerSlam to the Hart Foundation versus Demolition, and the best 2 out of 3 falls. Hart Foundation win the tag titles that night. They weren't always playing to win. But this was not enough. This was not enough for this young Natalie. I don't like that. I still think I should tell somebody about what I saw. And Vince McMahon says, you know what? What if in the future you will always be featured on our television screens? However, let's fast forward back to 1997. The screw job happens, inadvertently creates the greatest heel of all time, Mr. McMahon. However, that's just not enough. Like, he did the screw job, but he just wasn't confident in the future of the screw job. 1999, Starrcade in the main event for the WCW title, Bret Hart versus Goldberg. He hired Goldberg to put Bret Hart out of commission, and he kicked this man in the head, which eventually ends Bret Hart's career. Further ensures Bret Hart does not shine in World Championship Wrestling, further ensuring future victory for the World Wrestling Federation. In return for Goldberg taking out Bret Hart, he is heavily protected upon his return to the World Wrestling Entertainment in 2016. But that's what happens when Vince McMahon travels far back in time. You change the course of history. So now people got to deal with Natty Neidhart, and they got to deal with Goldberg.
Goldberg!